Hello, welcome to Coin Times with Maria Matic. I have a pleasure to speak to Alex Norta today. He's a professor of software science at Tallinn University in Estonia. He also worked on QTUM and wrote its white paper, and he also wrote many other white papers and has quite an impressive biography actually, because he worked on smart contracts since 16 years ago and DAOs long before Ethereum actually existed. So I'm really happy to have you here today and to speak to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome. So please tell me, Alex, how were smart contracts called back then, like 16 years ago? I remember that Nick Szabo coined the term smart contracts in 1994, but also I read in some of your papers, you kind of called them e-contracts. So can you tell me something about that?
Yes. So for me, it was kind of a surprise in the end that I worked on smart contracts. So initially, I just worked on automating cross-organizational production and supply chain processes for producing trucks. That was my case study. And it all culminated then because it was funded by some sort of EU project called Crosswork. That went quite well, and I ended up having to build proof of concept prototypes. So I translated everything I did into language, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I had a PhD buddy at TU Eindhoven back then called Samuel Angelov, and he actually worked purely on what we called back then e-contracting. Mm-hmm. And I realized, well, I have to develop this language. I need a proof of concept for Brussels and all that. And then I looked at Samuel's ECML language, mm-hmm. which is the e-contracting.
You basically created ECML contracting language, so for smart contracts.
That was the foundation. So mm-hmm. that was the foundation. But what I did was I developed a verifiable process-oriented language, really kind of a workflow language. And I realized that Samuel's ECML language was not really process-aware the way it should have been. And it also did not cater for this type of collaboration model that I figured out during my PhD thesis. So I took his language and enhanced it basically with this process-aware collaboration model mm-hmm. That I inserted and that made the collaborations or let's say before the enactment, verifiable with a tool support at the time. And out came a language I called the e-sourcing markup language, ECML, which is fully online. If you search a little bit, I also published it all in all sorts of journals, papers, and conference papers. And of course, it's in my PhD thesis. And that was then basically the language for which I also developed architecture and the full spectrum of artifacts that you basically need for the proof of concept prototyping. And that was, I started that I think in 2004. I had it all done in 2006. And I had everything. The only thing I was missing, I was supposed to work on it too, was the transaction machinery. And that is something I couldn't solve at the time. We thought about it, but I couldn't solve it. So I had everything else, but not this truth engine, so to speak. And so I was then left with the issue of figuring out trust management. So if you have an anonymous kind of platform where organizations come together like DAOs, and then nowadays you would call them DAOs. That's another thing that I could clarify, I believe, already back then, mm-hmm. what a DAO really is. And only now I know I can call it a DAO. I didn't have that term back then. And
how were they called back then, DAOs?
I just called this were just multi-layered collaboration models, process-aware collaboration models with an external contract sphere or process sphere that was used to match a service offer and a service request. Mm-hmm. And this was part of a larger in-house process on the side of the service consumer and the service providers, where they could or can hide more process details, because collaborating parties only want to show each other what is absolutely necessary and nothing more. So,
during the DAO hack, when Ethereum Classic Fork was made, you said that you mentioned that a protest part of smart contracts was underdeveloped at those moments, how did the DAO hack actually influence the development of smart contracting?
So this was quite crazy if you understand the background. So what they did back then, Vitalik, they built the DAO for crowdfunding. Mm-hmm. Then they immediately poured in, how many millions? 160 or something like that, mm-hmm. I think. Yeah. And then, so I also do a little bit of research into security, how to make sure software is secure. The problem is the language they use for DAO, this Solidity, is not really based on anything formal. So it's not possible with tool support to verify the security-wise correctness of the contract. And so what they did was they had kind of a social verification. Basically, they gave a friend the code for the DAO, and then that friend checked the code. But of course, my friend will not check the code and tell me, what you just did is complete rubbish.
So it wasn't trustless?
No, it was not. Security. No, first of all, it had no formal foundation to check the code with tool support, and secondly, the team that did the code checking, this was absolutely amateurish. And then there was a protocol issue. So basically what happened was somebody figured out this hack. This issue with the protocol. So basically what you could do, informally speaking, you could open a request for funding. There's like a door that you open, open sesame. You deposit the funding, and then like in a jukebox, the money comes out. And then this door is supposed to shut again, and the new request is supposed to be issued to open that. So instead, what, informally speaking, the hacker figured out was, I open the door, then I put a block in, so the door can't shut anymore, and then I just keep pulling, like 60 millions out. Okay. So this is basically what happened, and this is then exactly what you get. So the guy warned up front, actually, the team, and they didn't do anything. The Ethereum people, and then he said, I warned you. Code is law. The code has the problem. I told you so. Now I just exploit it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but the lesson learned was, of course, enormous. It came to the split. So that we have now Ethereum Bailout, which is the forked version, and then we have Ethereum Classic, where code is still law. But of course, the main problem that became obvious is that you need a formal, or let's say a mathematics-grounded language where you can then develop tools with algorithms where you can verify upfront before running the code if everything is correct.
So what do you think about Solidity now, like right now after?
It's still a very problematic language, but we have all these other languages. So we have, for example, we have like Cardano uses Haskell, which is a functional language, probably rooted in maths. Eternity uses Erlang, which comes from Ericsson, is also a functional language. Then we have like Tesos uses what's called OCaml. Mm-hmm. So there's some smart contract systems that actually use like functional languages that
What does it mean,
allow
functional language? What do you actually mean with that
okay,
phrase?
so I mean, yeah, I mean you have these scripting type of languages like the Solidity, but it has no proper mathematic grounding. So other languages like those I just mentioned, that kind of a different language family for programming. They're called functional languages, and for those you have a lot of tool support available for verification up front. I mean, that's basically the core advantage, and I think this is badly needed for sound and secure smart contract development. Yes.
So what would you say was the biggest contribution of Vitalik Buterin, and would you suggest any improvements or changes to Ethereum?
Yes, I mean what he did was he kind of threw the door open, and I can tell you that was a big deal because, like me, I then had my PhD in 2007. I went to Finland. I tried to explain to people, you know, we can have machine-readable contracts and we can collaborate in a peer-to-peer way. It's all very lean and agile and process-aware and all this stuff. And they all thought I'm totally crazy.
Of course.
And yeah, and then I told them, okay, we can do all of this in the cloud. You know, have these machineries for the setup and rollout, enactment, rollbacks, termination phases, all of that run in the cloud, like a toolkit for smart contract management. And in Finnish, cloud means pilvi, but it also means that you're stoned. And then they usually ask me where my PhD comes from, and then I told them, well, it's from the Netherlands, and then my credibility was completely gone, as you can imagine.
Yeah, well, the wrong choice of words.
But so I had for 10 years, I mean, I had all the results, and then for 10 years I was like in the dark because I couldn't solve the trust issue. But then Vitalik came out with Ethereum, and suddenly everything that I had done for myself, I knew, wow, now there's like a proof. It's actually doable. I had like all the extra layers on top, you know, that so Vitalik coming from the blockchain, inserting this Solidity scripting language in the protocol layer, and then in the white paper that completely blew my head off in 2014, he kind of said, okay, now all the problems are solved. And I knew, coming from the research kind of from the top down, I knew you got nothing solved. So this was very exciting. On the one hand side, he threw the door open, created all this awareness that I failed to achieve, unfortunately. But on the other hand, as a scientist, he created this fantastic opportunity to continue all the work I had done earlier. So it was just a very, very important moment, I would say, Ethereum.
Yeah.
The inception. Yeah.
So for attention and for the popularity.
So it suddenly sunk in, you know. I mean, I was trying hard for 10 years to explain to people what the heck I was actually up to during my PhD time in the Netherlands. But once Ethereum came out, this really suddenly created an excitement, and my life personally changed a lot with that. So I'm very thankful. Despite all the shortcomings, you know, I mean, it was like the first type of this kind of system. It's problematic, Ethereum and Solidity, but it was the absolute door opener.
Door opener. Would you suggest any changes or any improvements to Ethereum, or like is there anything bothering you? And I mean, in that sense, like the blockchain has changed the contractual law. But are there any trade-offs in terms, like when you want to make trustless, when you want third parties trustworthy, when you want, are there any trade-offs?
I mean, one issue is that Ethereum uses proof of work. So maybe for like high-value, like fintech transactions, maybe high-value transactions, maybe this makes sense. Just quickly sit down. Maybe this is good, but for other applications like, say, IoT or Industry 4.0 or something like that, then this might not be a good choice because, of course, of the computational expensiveness, and proof of work doesn't work. So proof of stake would be nice to have, and sharding actually things that they figured out that should be realized, but I haven't seen it yet. So I was like, was it 2 years ago? I was in Paris at an Ethereum conference, and Vitalik is a very honest guy. So
I've seen like there was a conference, this DevCon 4, and like there was this song, and he was singing like, we tried this, didn't work. We tried that, didn't work. So he seems very honest,
He's extremely honest, and they asked him also back then, so, I mean, when is Casper coming, this proof of stake stuff and all that? I said, no idea. I mean, we're trying. It's a nice educational experience, but maybe it comes never, Indeed.
Now they announce some parity or something, I'm not sure, but Constantinople has been delayed. So it's not going to happen until the beginning of 2019 or something. So
So I mean, one thing they seem to.
So that's your main point, like going proof of stake. You think would be quite beneficial for Ethereum and for sharding,
Sharding is very nice to have. Certainly, if you want to have mobile smart contracts. So, and this brings me to the quantum stuff, quantum.org, which was my first. ICO white paper I experimented with, starting like end of 2016, like, I don't know, I think December 2016 I started working on this, and they can already do proof of stake. They kind of combine in a nice way unspent transaction output protocol and simple payment verification from the Bitcoin ecosystem with the Ethereum virtual machine to break through the accounting or account-based model that you have in a bank, So, and you can then only work with the headers of the transactions in Quantum. So you can run light wallets, meaning, you don't have to download the entire blockchain onto your client or your machine. So you can't do that, obviously, with a smartphone. It's not possible, And also proof of stake already works there. The other nice innovation that's coming up that's very nice for my PhD students. So Ethereum, as I understand, they're setting up a kind of a virtual machine with which it's then possible to experiment with different types of smart contract languages. So if Solidity is like problematic because humans being fallible, they write buggy codes. There's no tool that supports the program. Just you can only have tools that check for heuristics, but not do some real formal verification. But with this new virtual machine, it's then actually possible to use or to come up with languages that are used on top of the Ethereum virtual machine that actually solve all these problems.
That's nice. That's interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, they're working on Ethereum. But let's see. I mean, it's a long, bumpy road, and we have now so many other smart contract systems too that are doing in some aspects better than others. So each one, has pros and cons.
What would you say is the main? What are the businesses are saying? Have you been in touch with different companies or something? What's the main issue with current smart contracting solutions? Is it user friendliness or something else?
I mean, so if you have a smart contract supported DApp, so I've been in, I don't know, like 9 ICOs or so far that since 2017, just working on white papers and so forth. What I have observed is, indeed, mobility is a big issue for dApps, distributed applications, for all sorts of domains, whether it's insurance or, I don't know, data sharing or I don't know. I mean, if you can't, people just like to use mobile devices and they move around and they don't want to be glued to some sort of laptop or PC, so that they can offset.
Hardware agnostic. They should be hardware agnostic.
But just that, you can have one of those little things or something more fanciful than that, actually, and just have a light wallet with which you can run your smart contracts. And here you cannot download the entire Ethereum blockchain. Yeah, so this is a big issue for distributed applications. And for example, I had one ICO called Data Wallet. DataWallet.com is easy to check. And when I developed the tech stack for the system, so Data Wallet is all about monetizing data sets you create on the Facebook, LinkedIn's, and Twitter's, and all these military-industrial spyware systems that just steal your data and then sell it behind your back.
Yes.
Stealing per month, get this, about $1,000 from you.
Per month.
Per month.
I want my money back.
Now.
Or my identity back.
Yes, exactly. It's crazy, and they don't even tell you that, but that's how it is. And with Data Wallet, you can monetize your data and sell it for DXT tokens. And when I developed the tech stack in the white paper for them for the system, I recommended to them, okay, use Quantum. Because there, indeed, as I explained earlier, you can go mobile and you can use proof of stake, and you can have light wallets. And indeed, when they then did their own choice independent of me, and of course, in the beginning, they could say, yeah, Alex, you're a bit biased because you wrote their white paper, But then I'm not involved at all in how they now develop the system, Data Wallet. But they indeed decided to opt for Quantum that has all these certain competitive advantages that are sufficient for say, the Data Wallet application to choose them, for smart contract solutions. So
what do you think the future holds for smart contracting? Like you said in, I think, one of your lectures or in papers, I'm not sure, that like escrow is like the business model of the future. You also mentioned business process as a service as one important future trend. And
process awareness. Yes, I think so. What we need to do in a way to centralize system landscape, we need to totally distribute, disintermediate, and decentralize everything. Everything. So smart contracts are the way forward, because with the blockchain underneath, we can create these trustless systems where we can basically cut out all these middlemen or trusted third parties where we know we can't trust them anyhow, whatever, corrupt, criminal, and just the cost factor that we don't need. So instead, we can have these smart contract platforms where we establish peer-to-peer collaborations that are much faster, much cheaper, and in the end, fully traceable. Because of course, the big advantage of the blockchain is, the blockchains get replicated, and if you own a central database where only one party or one organization has access in an ecosystem, then they can always manipulate the data, so it's not trustable. And when it comes to litigation, then of course everybody lies, as I have experienced myself very painfully in all sorts of court cases. It's part of the business, I guess. But if you run your collaborations on an immutably traceable ledger that gets copied, and that just solves so many problems, really, to establish trust, sort of in a trustless setting. And so we can cut out all these middlemen, and we can even get rid of government, and we can get rid of the banks and insurance companies. So I just wrote a white paper for an ICO that's ongoing, actually, for Black Dot Insure. And in that model, which I actually presented in Zurich the week after I was in Belgrade, I presented the white paper, and the white paper really proposes a model, smart contract DApp model, that completely automates the existing insurance industry away as we have it.
Yeah, I tried to read the paper, or something you wrote about it. It was so complicated. I didn't have time to kind of get into it more thoroughly. What about the fine prints? Like I remember Nick Szabo was writing about fine prints and how, POS terminals and the payments which go through them, you don't really know what are the hidden fine prints, and how much have been, and decentralization is there is a way to avoid it. So what's happening in smart contracting with the fine prints and
okay, about these questions, these systems from, what we can really do is we can fully automate payment processes, and we can actually make the payment processes smart. I mean, if we have the tokens or basically the crypto, we can equip those cryptos with logics, and then make money smart. I mean, try this with the euro. It's not really possible, but if you have complex payment systems, indeed we can equip cryptos that are used for payment transactions with logics, and then just have fully automated, self-streaming, basically flows of transactions that are then again fully traceable and immutably traceable. So I think, this is all fantastic if we think about the enormous potential of improving the performance, and the quality of service, the amount of money we can save, and the time we can save by getting rid of a whole lot of bureaucracy and layers and layers of bureaucracy and useless kind of even digital paperwork, if you will, and just automate all the slack out that we have at the moment in society. If we just the information flow, have these non-governmental currencies that we can make smart, even apply software agents to support these transactions, is actually something that I like to work on. Combine the smart contract systems with artificial software agents, and in the end you really end up with a new model of doing business, of e-governance. Something that can potentially and will revolutionize the way how we run society.
I remember you telling me about Estonia, and considering that it's the most digitalized country in the world, probably.
Based on my experience, I would agree. I've lived in a bunch of countries and traveled, and I'm just amazed how digitalized Estonia is. That's true. Yeah.
But you said how much. You were talking about the need for decentralization to implement that system, which Estonia has, but just decentralize it so the government doesn't have the complete control and influence on your life. Since you mentioned your ID is is your ticket to anywhere, to the bus, to anywhere. You cannot even move without.
This is one thing. So Estonia has very nice systems, but of course it's not. We have no much better technology, but you have to understand when these systems had the inception was in the 90s, when this country became a country for the first time in many years again, and it's a government control system. So it's a very nice system, but it's not. If we would do all of this now in a blockchain way, my word, this is just amazing. Take the Estonian model. Rip out all the legacy technology, just take the model and the concept, and then do this all really in a distributed, decentralized, disintermediated way. Exactly. Yeah. And also, what I find very problematic, it's very convenient, is this Estonian ID card. Do I have it somewhere? Oh, no. But, it's just a regular ID card like one of these things, I mean, with a chip. And the chip has the private key, and then I can sign everything and use the Estonian systems. But the problem is the government owns my identity, and not only that, but also the means of authenticating my identity. Mm-hmm. So then I live here like a slave on a plantation, and say I say something that the government doesn't like, and they can just switch off my cards, and then I got a problem, because in a country like Estonia, you seriously cannot function anymore without these damn cards. I mean, whether it's banking or e-schooling or e-law, mm-hmm. or I don't know, e-health or anything. I mean, mm-hmm. you just can't do anything anymore. So this mm-hmm. is you're like destitute.
So as much as this high tech is, advanced and makes you like comfortable, it's also much more tricky, and
potentially
they have much more control over you. So
absolutely. So as long as the government,
we should have. Now is the proper time to push for blockchain.
Absolutely, mm-hmm. And I mean, like the systems here are great, very convenient, but they are still centrally controlled. And as long as the government is nice and kind to you,
yes,
all is fine. But eventually, as we know in history, they all turn rogue and criminal. And it all, if you've read Plato's Republic, there's the good life cycle, and it always ends up in total collapse, murder, and mayhem, unfortunately. And then with these cards, this is super dangerous. Mm-hmm. When a government goes to its end life cycle of going rogue on the public, as it typically does, then we got a real problem, and that's why I also do research on non-governmental identity authentication systems. Mm-hmm. That is another experience from my white paper writings with these DApps. Such an identity authentication mechanism or framework is very important if you have smart contract platforms. I mean, there's the one aspect is that you can immutably trace all the events that happen. Mm-hmm. But then, yes, there are business collaborations or collaborations where you don't care who your counterparty is. But then there are many where you actually do care, but you don't want anybody else to know about it, you see? So how do you do that then? So and then this is a very interesting research question that I actually also work on and publish about.
I hope we're going to speak about that next time we do an interview. So it was lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Very, very nice talking to you.
Thank you, Alex. Bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.